Cluck adjusted his perch, the decrypted scroll of grain-husk parchment unspooling across the wire table like a tactical briefing. Beside him, Henrietta clucked softly, her eyes sharp behind a visor crafted from discarded poultry show ribbon and a modified feed bucket shield. The health inspector's sealed envelope now sat on the nesting straw like a loaded grenade. Cluck pecked at the cipher patch Winston had delivered earlier. It was active, verified against agri-shell data, and currently chewing through the encrypted manifest line by line. Winston run the agri-shell routing code against the Roost's internal ledger again. Cluck clucked, the sound low and modulated through a specialized hollow-reed amplifier hidden in the Coop's ventilation grill. From the far corner, the pig grunted, his snout tapping furiously at a makeshift console built from tractor parts and stolen veterinary monitors. Winston's ears swiveled. Processing, the pig oinked, his voice synthesized through a ham radio collar. The screens flickered. Data streams cascaded down the monitors. Cluck watched, his feathers bristling with professional tension. There it was, a recurring discrepancy buried in the supply chain, a phantom shipment of neural harvesting equipment routed through the Golden Grain Mill, a legitimate poultry feed distributor that served as a front. The cargo list read like a mad engineer's nightmare. Microsyringe injectors disguised as calcium supplements and cognitive dissonance amplifiers wrapped in probiotic grain. Henrietta turned her attention to the Coop's exterior. A modified motion sensor, wired to a repurposed smartphone taped beneath the Roost box, picked up a rhythmic pulse from the barn entrance. Cluck, she clucked sharply, tapping a rhythm against the wire mesh. The health inspector isn't inspecting, he's transmitting. Cluck pivoted, his gaze snapping to the sensor feed projected onto a mirrored shard of glass. The screen showed the inspector standing just outside the perimeter fence, holding a tablet that glowed with a secure uplink. A progress bar indicated a live stream of Muddington Acres' interior. Worse, a red alert icon pulsed near the cipher patch data. The inspector had already flagged Cluck's decryption activity. He wasn't just watching, he was reporting coordinates to an unknown recipient in real time. "He knows we're digging," Cluck clucked, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "We need the destination before he triangulates the source." "Coordinates locked," Winston grunted, his hooves stomping on a pedal that cranked a mechanical decoder. "Phantom shipment destination confirms. It's not a static warehouse. It's a mobile neural lab housed in a refrigerated transport truck, currently parked at the abandoned agri-shell logistics hub near the disused rail spur." Cluck stared at the coordinates. The implications settled over him like frost on the Coop floor. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was targeted research. Neural harvesting, Cluck clucked, the realization hitting with the force of a falling feed bag. The safe house houses equipment capable of reverse engineering assassin roosters. Henrietta's comb flared. "Your contracts," she clucked, her voice tight with dawning horror. "You thought you were eliminating threats to the farm, but you've been walking into traps designed to capture your neural patterns. The Roost isn't just manipulating assignments, they're farming you for data." Henrietta's feathers ruffled violently. "She knew you'd find the patch. She let us verify the agri-shell link just to draw us deeper." Cluck shook his head slowly. "No, she needed us to confirm the phantom shipment exists. Without that proof, the Roost could deny the Neural Lab project entirely. I'm not just a target, I'm the verification mechanism." Cluck's eyes narrowed. Every elaborate elimination, every brush with death, it had all been a calculated harvest of his tactical instincts. "The game has changed," Cluck clucked, turning back to the manifests. He scanned the handler's cipher signature attached to the mobile lab's command packet. His blood ran cold. The pattern was unmistakable, a unique cryptographic fingerprint he had encountered only once before in his career. "Mother Hen," he clucked, the name tasting like ash in his beak. "The authorizing signature for this safe house matches her personal key." Henrietta froze, her head cocking to the side. "The leader of the Roost is feeding targets to you. She's the manipulator." Cluck didn't answer immediately. He calculated the risk. The mobile lab posed an existential threat to every avian operative in the hemisphere. If they captured him again with this technology, Muddington Acres would fall within a week. "We have no choice," Cluck clucked, his voice hardening into steel. I authorize an urban elimination of the safe house handler. We infiltrate the logistics hub, seize the master terminal, and destroy the neural lab before the inspector can report our position. He looked at Henrietta, then Winston. Prep the extraction route. We're going out to the city. The pale dawn light filtered through the woven straw of Muddington Acres' coop, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. Cluck stood motionless on his favorite roost, eyes narrowed as he processed the decrypted intelligence spread out before him. The phantom neural harvesting shipment was not a ghost story. It was a logistics problem waiting to be solved with extreme prejudice. Beside him, Henrietta adjusted her posture, the formal weight of their shared command authority settling between them. They were co-conspirators now, bound by secrets and a mutual distrust of the Roost's upper echelons. Cluck hopped down, his claws clicking rhythmically against the wooden roost. The target is clear, he thought, adopting the gravelly cadence of a veteran field agent. But architecture remains the enemy. He turned to the far corner of the pen where Gerald was attempting to digest a discarded garden hose. "Gerald," Cluck said, his voice a crisp cluck that Henrietta translated into clear English. "We require your structural expertise." Gerald paused mid-chew, saliva dripping onto the straw. "Is it about the big metal box?" "The very same," Cluck confirmed. "A lifetime supply of premium grain, imported oats, the kind that tastes like victory." Gerald's eyes widened, vibrating with enthusiasm. He dropped the hose and began pacing in tight circles, calculating load-bearing weak points. "I can chew the big metal box. I can bring the whole dock down. Which way does it lean? Is it galvanized?" Cluck gestured toward Winston's burrow entrance. "Consult the manifest. The safehouse route aligns with your preferred galvanized steel supports." Winston emerged from his burrow, wearing spectacles crafted from bottle glass and wire. He carried decrypted supply manifests, navigating to the center of the operation. "The waste disposal route is unguarded," Winston rasped, his voice thick with conspiracy. "Agri-Shell uses it for bulk organic transport. It feeds directly into a loading dock supported by 4 primary steel columns. Corrosion levels are critical. You push one, the geometry fails." Cluck nodded, mapping the collapse in his mind. "Gerald will initiate the structural destabilization. The resulting debris field will mask our entry vector. We move while the safehouse handler is distracted by falling infrastructure." Henrietta stepped forward, her feathers preened to a military sharpness. "Security rotation is predictable but tight. Automated sweeps rely on olfactory triggers. If we feed them something irresistible, they will chase the bait." She unveiled a modified agricultural drone from behind a stack of feed sacks, its rotors stripped down and reinforced with chicken wire. Mounted beneath it was a spherical container woven from burlap. "The Roost ruse," Henrietta announced. "I have synthesized a deek grain pile infused with highly concentrated pheromone attractants. It will read as a premium feed drop to any automated security sweep." She turned to Cluck. "Deployed at the safehouse perimeter, it will draw the guard rotation away from the primary approach for exactly 4 minutes. The margin for error is 0. "Precision is paramount," Cluck murmured. He reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing the farm-grade grounding wire he had salvaged during their previous extraction. The copper strand gleamed in the coop light. With a few sharp pecks and a twist of his beak, he stripped and reconfigured the insulation. A signal jammer, his mind supplied, compact, portable. He coiled the modified wire into a tight spiral. The safehouse utilizes biometric scanners at the loading dock. This will create a localized feedback loop, bypassing the retinal authentication while I slip past. He handed the coil to Henrietta, who tucked it into her satchel. "You stand by for the smart home network breach," Cluck instructed. "Once Gerald initiates the collapse, you intercept the warehouse's environmental controls, disable the thermal sensors, and override the interior locks." "Understood," Henrietta replied, her eyes gleaming with tactical satisfaction. "The Roost ruse is primed. Gerald knows his coordinates. Your jammer is operational. We are ready to execute." Cluck surveyed his team. Gerald was vibrating so hard he kicked up dust clouds that coated Winston's spectacles in soil. The dawn air felt charged, thick with calculated chaos. The infiltration plan was finalized. Gerald mobilized, decoy deployed. "Execute," Cluck commanded. Henrietta launched the drone toward the horizon, its whirring blades fading into the morning mist. Gerald charged toward the pen gate, ready to face his metallic destiny. Cluck adjusted his coat, feeling the weight of the jammer against his flank. The phantom shipment awaited, and with it, the truth about who was feeding them lies from above. Cluck Norris stood in the shadows of the urban warehouse, his comb twitching against the damp air. Beside him, Gerald vibrated with the kind of kinetic energy that usually preceded structural failure. The safehouse masqueraded as a poultry feed distributor, but to Cluck's trained eye, the supply manifests told a different story. Neural harvesting equipment did not require this much galvanized steel. "Perimeter check," Cluck clucked softly. Henrietta's voice crackled in his earpiece, a modified receiver hidden in his breast feathers. "Decoy grain is primed. The pile at the south gate looks like premium organic oats to anyone with a beak and poor vision, triggering in 3. A sudden rustle echoed from the street. Henrietta had activated the remote dispenser. Instantly, 2 guards abandoned their posts near the loading bay and sprinted toward the south fence, drawn by the phantom aroma of high-grade feed. The decoy worked too well. They were already clawing at the wire mesh. "Signal confirmed," Cluck muttered. He tapped his wing against Gerald's flank. "The column, Gerald, now." Gerald didn't need to be told twice. With a bleat that sounded like a rusty hinge giving up the ghost, he charged the primary support beam near the loading dock. His teeth met galvanized steel with the enthusiasm of a creature who had just discovered chewing was his true calling. Sparks flew as metal sheared under determined bovine pressure. Cluck watched the structural integrity metrics in his mind. Gerald's gnawing hit the critical threshold with surgical precision. The support column groaned, shuddering like a nervous horse before buckling. The collapse was catastrophic, though entirely predictable. As the beam gave way, it struck a nearby rack of industrial fertilizer bags. The impact dislodged a heavy-duty shopping trolley parked precariously on the ramp. The trolley lurched forward, gathering momentum, until it careened into a stack of steel crates with the force of a runaway locomotive. The resulting avalanche was magnificent in its absurdity. Feed bags burst open, releasing clouds of coarse grain that billowed like fog. 2 guards who had returned from the perimeter were caught in the crossfire, buried instantly under a cartoonish heap of fertilizer and sacks of corn. They disappeared beneath the debris with only a muffled MMPH, audible before silence reclaimed the chaos. "Structural failure complete," Cluck noted dryly. "Distraction level maximum." While the guards scrambled to dig themselves out of the grain storm, Cluck scurried toward the ventilation shaft. He slipped inside the ductwork, navigating past grease traps and thermal sensors with the grace of a shadow. The path to the server room was clear in theory. In practice, the warehouse was rigged with livestock-grade security. Thermal cameras swept the corridor below, their red sweeps calibrated to detect warm-blooded movement. Cluck froze as a beam crossed his position. He adjusted his gait, adopting a low, sliding posture calculated to mimic the thermal signature of a draft rather than a rooster. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped moth. He reached the junction box for the server room door. Just as he prepared to drop, the thermal sensors screamed. The calibration algorithm had flagged his wing joints as anomalous heat spikes. A piercing alarm blared through the warehouse, shattering the temporary peace. "Compromised," Cluck hissed internally. "Rooster gate detected. Cameras are locking." Below, security cameras swiveled toward the vent, their lenses zooming with hostile intent. The system reboot cycle had initiated, but the reload time was too long. Cluck needed a window, and he needed it now. "Henrietta," he signaled, "I'm pinned." On it, Henrietta replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. Muddington's automated Coop door is charging its high-frequency emitter. If I unleash this signal, it should scramble their local network hard enough to force a full reboot. But Cluck, the feedback might singe your comb. Better feathers than capture, do it. A moment later, a screech tore through the airwaves, not from the warehouse, but from a frequency only digital sensors could hear. Muddington's Coop door emitted a burst of ultrasonic noise that rippled outward like a shockwave. Inside the warehouse, every camera sparked and went dark. Monitors flickered violently before displaying the blue screen of death. The system reboot timer reset to 0. Cameras down, Cluck confirmed, watching the red lights wink out one by one. Guards are blinded. The door is unlocked, breaching in 3, 2. He dropped from the vent onto the server room console, his claws clicking against the metal as he prepared to dive into the network. The handler would not expect a rooster with a grudge and a ventilation route. Cluck Norris spread his wings, ready to turn the tide of the phantom shipment. The urban warehouse server room hummed with the sterile indifference of a tomb designed for silicon rather than flesh. Cluck stood before the primary terminal, his reflection warped in the dark monitor glass. A professional assesses the terrain, a chicken assesses the grain. Tonight he did both. His wings brushed the mechanical keyboard, inputting Winston's decryption sequence with precise, calculated taps. The cipher patch bit into the safehouse firewall like a hawk into a field mouse. On screen, lines of code unspooled, neural harvesting logs detailing phantom shipments routed through this very feed distributor. Cluck tracked the authorization chain, his golden eye narrowing as the digital breadcrumbs led upward. They did not stop at agri-shell executives or shadow brokers operating out of London. The final approval stamp bore a crest he had seen in the nesting straw since dawn, the Matriarch's sigil, Mother Hen. The realization struck with the quiet force of a falling anvil, reverberating through his avian chassis. His handler, his mentor, the voice that had guided him through 12 episodes of calculated violence, it was all a testing ground. She wasn't building an assassin, she was stress-testing neural harvesting technology on high-value targets, using his contracts as disposable calibration runs. Henrietta's voice crackled in his modified ear-feather transmitter, sharp and urgent. Cluck, the ledger matches. The grain shipments are funding the lab. You're not fighting a syndicate, you're walking through her door. Cluck let out a low, guttural cluck that meant absolute confirmation of data integrity. He would have burned the entire agricultural sector for it, but professional discipline demanded he secure the proof first, before engaging any emotional variables that might compromise the mission parameters. The data streamed past his vision in cascading green glyphs. Every line confirmed the same horrifying truth. The neural harvesting arrays were not theoretical constructs drafted by faceless analysts. They were operational prototypes funded directly by the Roost's central treasury. Mother Hen had weaponized her own flock, turning their clandestine operations into a live-fire exercise for experimental brain-computer interfaces. Cluck felt the cold weight of betrayal settle in his gizzard, but he forced it down. Emotion was a luxury assassins could not afford during active extraction. He initiated the secondary backup protocol, routing the core files through Henrietta's secure channel while simultaneously preparing to overwrite the local cache. The heavy steel door groaned open before he could archive the files. The safehouse commander stepped into the server room's blue glow, flanked by 2 guards in tactical gear. In his gloved hand, he held a captured carrier pigeon, its leg banded with crimson wax. Orders from the Matriarch, the man rasped, reading the sealed parchment without looking up. Terminate the rooster assassin. He has seen too much. Cluck recognized the voice, cold, bureaucratic, utterly unaware of the irony. To them, he was just a pest in a tactical vest. The commander raised a hand and flicked a switch on his belt. Instantly, a heavy electronic collar snapped shut around Cluck's neck, deployed from a concealed dispensing unit near the doorframe. A high-voltage pulse locked his wings to his sides, grounding him instantly. The heavy titanium band bit into his feathers, cold and unyielding against his skin. Cluck struggled against the current, feathers ruffling in static shock. Tactical retreat, he thought, or tactical adaptation. He let out a sharp, aggressive crow that sounded like a malfunctioning alarm clock, though it meant nothing to the humans. The commander sneered, stepping onto the raised metal gantry overlooking the server floor as the first drops of water began to hiss from the ceiling pipes. Outside, Gerald had finished his work. A main coolant line sheared off with a metallic shriek, spraying industrial freezing fluid into the room below. The commander shouted an order, scrambling up the gantry ladder as the floodwaters surged across the grating, swallowing machinery and paperwork alike. The locks on the server door engaged automatically due to the water ingress, sealing the room with a final, echoing clang. Cluck stood knee-deep in rising industrial coolant, the electronic collar still humming violently while the terminal screen glowed with stolen data. The handler's life was no longer the priority. He had to extract Mother Hen's command codes before the Syndicate initiated a remote wipe. The mission had shifted from assassination to survival. The water rose with the persistence of a bad rumor, lapping at the server racks in a rising tide of calculated malice that threatened to short-circuit the very evidence Cluck needed. He stood atop a stack of hardened drives, his feathers matted with the humidity of betrayal, yet his mind remained as sharp as a fresh spur. A professional assassin does not panic, he adapts, and adaptation is victory waiting to happen. His eyes locked onto the pallet of premium feed bags drifting near the perimeter, a floating vessel of opportunity in the chaos. Hydrodynamics were merely physics applied with ambition. With a powerful kick of his spurs, Cluck launched himself from the drives, landing softly on the bobbing wood. The pallet shifted, but held firm under his precise weight distribution, demonstrating the subtle balance of a master of gravity. He rode the current like a general surveying a battlefield, feeling the water pressure against the door seals whine in protest as the volume increased. The locks groaned, their complex mechanisms overwhelmed by the swelling tide and Cluck's calculated navigation of the drift, finally yielding with a metallic sigh. The pallet slid into the commander's office, depositing him squarely before the desk. Commander Vane struggled to rise from the floor, his electronic collar sparking erratically as it fought against the conductivity of the wet concrete. He reached for the device at his throat, his eyes widening in dawning horror as he recognized the rooster standing with impossible poise on a pallet of grain. Cluck did not hesitate. Hesitation was fatal. With a swift motion of his wing, he hooked a loose grounding wire left by Gerald's earlier structural work and bridged it against the smart home control panel mounted on the wall. The panel sputtered, its delicate logic confused by farm-grade interference in a secure room. A malfunctioning sprinkler head overhead burst with the violence of a ruptured irrigation pipe, but the system, corrupted by the bridge, dumped conductive foam directly onto the commander's collar instead of water. The device shrieked, emitting a sonic pulse tuned to the frequency of pure panic. Vane clutched his head and stumbled backward, tripping over a loose cable that activated a remote conveyor belt mechanism buried under debris. He was swept into a chute loaded with empty crates, vanishing in a chaotic cascade of cardboard and silence that echoed only in the realm of cause and effect, leaving only ozone and regret. The room fell quiet save for the hum of servers and the distant roar of foam settling over the warehouse. Cluck stepped onto the desk, his gaze fixed on the terminal screen that had been obscured by Vane's body, now accessible at last. The neural harvesting logs lay exposed, unsecured and begging for review. He pecked at the keyboard with surgical precision, navigating through layers of encryption until he reached the authorization chain that bound the phantom shipments to this very location. There it was, Mother Hen's encrypted command codes, stamped with her unique biometric signature intimate to him. The betrayal tasted like ash in his beak, bitter and undeniable. Through his comms link, Henrietta's voice crackled, steady as the bedrock of the Coop. "Winston has the patch," she reported. A moment later, Winston's synthesized tone confirmed the match. Affirmative. These codes align with the Roost's highest clearance protocols. The network is fully traceable back to Agri Shell. Cluck downloaded the master command codes, securing the proof of her treachery. The objective was clear. The manipulator had signed her own indictment with every keystroke. Below, the warehouse churned with confused hostiles attempting to regroup in the chaos. Cluck needed an exit, a clean extraction vector that would allow him to return to Muddington with the evidence intact. He signaled Henrietta, emitting a sharp series of clucks that translated instantly to his partner's interface, requesting chaos. Henrietta relayed the command through the secure channel to Gerald. Across the warehouse, the goat found himself directly before the fire suppression controls. With a look of pure joy, Gerald sank his teeth into the primary release valve, chewing through the galvanized steel enthusiastically. The system interpreted the structural failure as a catastrophic event and responded with maximum force, overriding all safety protocols. A blast of high-expansion foam erupted from every nozzle simultaneously, filling the warehouse in seconds, neutralizing the remaining hostiles beneath a rapidly hardening mountain of white suds that pinned them like specimens. The perimeter cleared instantly, the foam acting as weapon and pathway, allowing Cluck to secure the data drive against his chest with a satisfied cluck. He turned toward the newly cleared extraction path, code secured, handler gone by poor electrical choices, returning home. The drainage tunnels of Muddington Acres smelled of damp earth and old secrets, but to Cluck Norris, it was simply the extraction route. His plumage still carried the faint, chlorinated tang of the urban safehouse, a stark contrast to the familiar loam of his home turf. He emerged from the culvert beneath the Coop just as the first grey light of dawn bled across the Yorkshire sky. The neural data drive was tucked securely beneath a loose floorboard in the nesting box, a small silver rectangle that held enough evidence to topple an international syndicate. Cluck gave a soft, satisfied cluck. The mission was complete. Mother Hen's betrayal had been confirmed, her command code secured, and the neural harvesting network laid bare for Winston to dissect. It was over, or so he told himself. In his line of work, survival was just a pause between storms. He adjusted his comb with practiced indifference. A professional never lets the damp get to his feathers. Inside the main barn, Gerald was already vibrating with post-mission adrenaline. He stood before a freshly gnawed support beam in the hayloft, his eyes wide with uncontainable glee. Cluck trotted over, pecking at the base of the timber until it groaned ominously, then nudged a heavy sack of premium grain toward the goat's hooves. A professional thanks for a professional collapse, Cluck thought, though Gerald only responded by chewing a handful of straw with theatrical enthusiasm. Cluck gave a curt nod to the animal, dismissing him from active duty. The structural weakness in the barn was noted and would be left to fester until its time came. No more loading docks, no more runaway trolleys. Gerald had earned his retirement in grain, a fitting end for an animal who treated infrastructure like a salad bar. Winston awaited them beneath the Coop's raised floorboards, his snout buried in a stack of decrypted supply manifests. The pig looked up, spectacles askew. "It is done," Cluck signed with a sharp tilt of his head. Winston exhaled a long plume of swamp air and began to read aloud, his voice gravelly but precise. The command codes matched perfectly. Every phantom shipment, every neural harvesting device routed through Agri-Shell bore the unmistakable digital signature of the Matriarch. Mother Hen had not merely overseen the operation, she had orchestrated it. For years, she had been feeding Cluck targeted contracts, each assassination carefully chosen to harvest the neural patterns of high-value subjects for a synthetic intelligence program. He was not an assassin. He was a test subject on a leash, dancing to the tune of a traitor he once called mother. The irony was almost too rich to swallow. The revelation hung in the humid air like frost. Henrietta stepped from the shadows of the feed sacks, her feathers ruffled not by fear but by cold fury. She had watched Cluck disappear into the night to face impossible odds, trusting him implicitly. To learn that his entire career was a manipulative experiment left her trembling with a new kind of resolve. She approached Cluck, resting her wing against his flank in a gesture of pure solidarity. "The Roost's leader is gone," Henrietta murmured, her voice steady and sharp as a blade. "We will take them down." Cluck met her gaze, the unspoken weight of shared command passing between them. They were no longer just tactical partners, they were the de facto commanders of the resistance. Every decision from this moment forward would be made together, balancing farm life with the ruthless necessities of espionage. As the sun crested the barn roof, bathing the coop in pale gold light, Cluck paced along the wooden planks, surveying their new reality. The conspiracy was exposed, but exposure was merely the first phase of war. He turned toward the open doorway, intending to inspect the perimeter for secondary threats, when a low hum cut through the morning stillness. Cluck froze, his neck feathers bristling instinctively. He looked up. Over the rolling pastures of Muddington Acres, the sky darkened with the synchronized beating of rotors. A flock of surveillance drones materialized from the haze, their lenses glinting like predatory eyes. The air crackled as they powered up their speakers, broadcasting a distorted, mechanically amplified rooster call that echoed across the valley. It was not a greeting. It was a declaration of immediate aerial retaliation from the syndicate. Cluck's comb stiffened. The game had changed, but the Bantam was ready to lay down the law.